Get your clients from contact to consultation with Jan Roos, episode 242. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and it's guest interview day. And I love Thursdays. I love the days that we release these amazing guests to you and allow them to just share, unleash the amazing talent and information that they've gathered over many, many years to come to the point in their journey where they're just a wealth of knowledge, and we just love having them. But today's guest is somebody really special. And there's the reason that this is somebody really special is I don't think I ever shared this story, but my guest today is Jan Roos. Now, Jan is an author of the Legal Marketing Fast Lane. Now, when I first decided that I was going to help specifically law firms, so I had started my business, I was already 3 years in, and I suddenly attracted one law firm who then referred another. Before I knew it, I had 6 law firms as clients. And I noticed that they all had a common denominator. They all had the same manifestation of their business issues. And I realized that there was a bigger, broader problem in the industry, and I really should look at seeing if I can help specifically the legal industry. And when I started doing that, the first thing I did was market research. And I went on Amazon and I bought every single book that was ever written for law firms on law firm growth. Everything from what's the big blue one, Foonberg or whatever his name is, and one of the books that came is the Legal Marketing Fast Lane by Jan Roos. Now I'm going through these books, just perusing them, right, and just leafing through them, and I'm going through the Amazon reviews, and so that my next step is I'm going to try to connect with these authors. So I reach out to every single author that I have, in this repertoire of books that I've amassed. And one of them responded to me, and his name was Jan Roos. And he was very kind, and, in that initial conversation, and he said, yeah, let's jump on a call. We had a great first conversation, and the rest is history. So he's one of the first people that I spoke to in the legal industry that was really helped give me color and know that I was heading in the right direction, and also rooting for me, which it's interesting because at this point in my journey, it's almost like, oh, you've been doing this for forever, right? But no, I had to start somewhere too. And just like any law firm owner has to start somewhere, right? When you first start, you've got this imposter syndrome. You don't know where to go. You don't know how to start. And when you get that helping hand, it makes a huge impression. Jan is also one of the select few people, because I've only been serving the legal industry for a couple of years. A lot of that was COVID. So there was no opportunity to meet anybody in person. So you're one of the select few people that I've had speak at our events, that I've had, that I've been on your show, that we've met in person. We actually got together in New York City and had lunch together. So it's just really an honor to finally have you on the show. I didn't realize that we hadn't had you here yet, to finally have you on the show. So folks, let me give you the official bio. Jan has generated millions in revenue for law firms through digital advertising through his agency, Case Fuel, and his best-selling book on the subject, The Legal Marketing Fast Lane. After seeing the success of his largest clients, he has added helping firms double their case files without increasing spend through focusing on intake process, in addition to innovating in new ways to bring clients using paid traffic. And this is something that really excites me about what he's doing, is this idea that maybe we don't need more leads. Maybe we just need to do a better job with the leads that are already coming in. Now, some of you may be saying, well, I'm not getting any leads. My phone's not ringing. If that's the case, yes, you need more leads. But often the case is that the leads are not coming in, and we're going to dive into that. I'm sorry, the leads are coming in. You're not doing a good job with the intake process. We're going to dive into that with our conversation with Jan. So I'm gonna bring him on in just a moment. Before I do that, I'm gonna cut to a message from our sponsors. Please show them some love. They make this show possible. We'll be right back.
Finding amazing employees is the toughest job for any business, and especially for a law firm. You deserve to be the law firm owner you've always wanted to be, but you can't get there without a great team. Get Staffed Up helps you build your all-star team by staffing your law firm with incredible full-time offshore virtual assistants. Work with Get Staffed Up to save money and your biggest resource, time, while they find you the best English-speaking VAs in the world. Hashtag delegate your way to freedom. To learn more, go to profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. Thanks to our sponsor, Smith AI. Smith AI is a superior virtual receptionist service for small businesses. They specialize in working with solo and small law firms. I discovered Smith AI a couple of years ago and was blown away by the range of services, which are available at a cost any attorney, even those of you in the smallest solo practice, can afford. Their friendly receptionists respond to potential clients in English or Spanish, screen and schedule new leads, and even take payment for consults. The best part is, they don't just handle these conversations by phone. They also have live agents and chatbots capturing leads on websites and via text message. If there's one growth hack to your practice, this is it. Smith's friendly gatekeepers can staff your front lines. They'll capture new leads while you work uninterrupted. You can finally have the peace of mind that while you're working, you're not missing out on future work. Plans start at just $210 a month for calls and $140 a month for chats. They even offer a totally free chatbot, so there's no excuse. Try Smith AI today and see for yourself why attorneys like Justin Nickel in Colorado say Smith AI receptionists are the secret to business growth and client happiness. Smith AI offers a free trial, and podcast listeners can get an extra $100 discount with promo code ProfitLaw100. That's ProfitLaw100. Sign up and learn more at www.smith.ai. Trust me when I say, don't let another day go by. Try Smith AI.
Can I say something?
All right, we're back. Jan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Moshe. Super appreciate it.
It's my absolute pleasure. And remind me, because you've had multiple iterations of podcast. You're also a podcast host. So let's plug that here. What's the name of your show currently?
Today and for the future notice, I believe, Law Firm Growth Podcast. Yeah, there was the relaunch. You're one of the few people who knows about that, actually.
Yeah. So Law Firm Growth Podcast. That's what it is. Law Firm Growth Podcast. So go check it out in your podcast player. We'll also link it up in the show notes. So on your podcast player, go in the description. You'll see a link to it. You can click over there, subscribe to that show, check it out. And you can, if you go through the archives, you'll see that I think I was your guest not once, not twice, but 3 times.
Repeat. Yeah, you're the only hat trick, I think, so far.
So I hold that honor. I'm proud of it. I'm going to put a plaque on the wall for it. But yeah, no, it's really exciting to just be collaborating together in various shapes and forms. But I know you very well. My audience has no idea. Some of them have no idea who you are. So let's start there. Tell us a little bit about you and how you entered the world of legal marketing, and just a little bit about your journey without too much, just a little bit to give people an idea of who you are. And then I really have a lot of topics I want to cover with you. So we want to make sure we get to those as well.
Okay, I'm going to try to do a Quentin Tarantino in media res start to the story. So I just left my first startup. I was walking across the street on Essex, listening to a podcast while answering emails. And I looked over my shoulder and I saw a car that was clearly not going to be able to stop short. I was able to bounce off the hood of the car. I wasn't really that injured, but I ended up bruising my leg. But at the time, we're going to kick back Quentin Tarantino. So I decided to start a marketing thing. And I used that as my excuse to cold email every single personal injury lawyer that was advertising on Google AdWords in New York City. And that was actually how I ended up closing my first attorney deal. But yeah, anyways, to go a little bit back to the beginning, prior to starting the agency, I actually started, I ended up winning a grant after I was like graduating school. So I ended up using that to start my first business, which was in consumer products. And this is a story arc I've heard elsewhere, but this is my version of it. I ended up hiring out marketing and I absolutely lost my shirt. So I got really pissed off and I decided to figure it out for myself. And then after I transitioned out of that business, that's why I ended up deciding to go into marketing on my own. I just realized that the bar was on the floor. Like it's like you have these situations where there's kind of like no transparency, a lot of the times no communication. The issue that I found myself seeing when I was hiring that person for the first time, and something I've realized is more common, is that like we had just made the largest commitment of money that we'd ever made in terms of marketing the business at the time on Google AdWords. And I didn't hear from the guy until it was time to get his second month's retainer. And nothing had happened. We had no idea if it was failing at step A or step D. And we didn't have any prescriptions on how things were going to change. So it was a huge bummer. And then, that kind of got the fire in my belly to go figure out how to do a lot of this stuff on myself. And, I think that technically started, it's called 2012. So it was like, and I've been marketing before in like other capacities since 2009, I think, but pretty much that's kind of what led me, or at least what got the ball rolling to where we're at today. So, kind of fast forward, me getting hit by the car was in 2015. So basically we ended up, pretty similar story to you actually. So it's like, the initial success that we'd had with attorneys really tracked. I'd never been an attorney. I don't plan on going through law school at any point, but at this point we have worked with literally hundreds of law firms, concurrently working with hundreds of law firms at the moment. So we've had a really, really interesting cross section of, what works in different markets, different practice types, different configurations on how people do the intake. And, the approach that I really try to take is to help people, reach the benchmarks that we know are possible with the strongest firms out there. And what I think is kind of cool is that a lot of the times, if you want to look at the leader in your market, and like some people absolutely have the chutzpah to go out and say, hey, man, what are you doing that's working? And then it'll sometimes happen. But, it's kind of tough to have an inside fly in the wall look on what it really looks like in a lot of firms, which is something I feel extremely privileged to have. And that's basically what we're able to kind of parse and get into the practices that we recommend to our clients beyond the marketing stuff, which we found is a start, but the marketing is not going to work. At the end of the day, we don't have a business if people aren't depositing checks into their account, right? So that's kind of how it's evolved since then.
Right. Yeah. And I totally want to get into that conversation of what happens after the marketing piece and how do we differentiate. Lawyers tend to call it all intake, right? Mm-hmm. There's no marketing, it's intake. And there is first of all, I hate the word intake. I think it's a cop out. It's somebody trying to say, oh, I don't sell, so I do intake. The reality is that you're selling and you need to learn how to sell. But that's a whole nother, we can digress there, but I do want to cover that. But before that, you wrote your book. What year was it that you wrote your book?
I think 2017.
Okay. So we're 4 years later, and in 4 years in internet marketing world I mean, everything's different, right? Is your book still relevant, or is a rewrite needed? Is for somebody who says, oh, I like this guy, I'm going to go read his book. Where does your book stand right now in the archives of relevancy for today's market?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So basically, I ended up actually doing a rewrite in 2019. The real thing that made that necessary was the switch from the Google Ads interface to the new Google. I guess it was actually, it's funny because that was the Google AdWords interface, and now they rebranded to the Google Ads interface. So basically, the book has 3 sections. There's sort of a marketing philosophy section in the beginning. There's like a really in the trenches tutorial how to set up ad campaigns that convert in the middle. And then there's sort of like an accessory considerations in the end. And it was actually kind of funny. If I would love to, it's been a while since I've looked back at it, but I remember I had a chapter on intake and I was like, wow, this is so, it's pretty much been the focus of expansion since then. But I will say this, the principles have not changed. The first section and the third section are as relevant today as they were the day they were written. The thing that has changed, in my opinion, is that second section. And the thing that's kind of unfortunate is that if I were to rewrite this today, the pace at which Google is changing their platform would probably make it irrelevant in 3 months. So it's pretty crazy. Like we're dealing with a lot of different stuff on the Google front. That was pretty much, I would say 95% of what we were doing for people back in that point in time. But since then, we've actually sort of distanced ourselves from Google. So I've actually thought about rewriting a book, but it wouldn't be around that. The stuff that we've really been talking about a lot internally and with clients and stuff like that is really kind of bridging that, let's not say intake, let's call it sales gap.
There you go.
But yeah, I mean, realistically, the thing is, we have a situation where, this is something kind of an interesting perspective. It's like, if you have somebody, like it's anything, marketing times sales equals your results. If you multiply either of those things by 0, it's a 0. You could have the most talented marketer with the best campaign with the most spend. And if you can't get the sales part correct, you're still going to wind up as a 0. And the flip side, if you have somebody that's good enough with sales, you can have, your leads coming from a guy that's spinning a sign in front of your office. It doesn't really matter. But the way that people think about these things is really different. And like, I've got a million reasons why I think that happens from like a mental perspective. But in general, it's a lot easier for people to say this marketing campaign didn't work than I need to do better. Right. It's easier to say the leads didn't work than to pick up the phone and figure out how to get this. The firms that are doing the best, I can tell you this objectively from having worked with a lot of the best in their respective markets, is that, sorry, the firms that are making the most money do not care about lead quality. Lead quality is not part of their vocabulary. They know that if they have somebody's interest, they can get their attention, they can get to make a decision, and they can make them to take action. It doesn't matter where they came from. It's just, they just need to catch their eye. And if somebody has a problem, then they can connect them to a solution, which is them. So that's what I would hope to get for most of the other people. And then I guess that would be the book I'd publish today.
Now, when you're looking at these, successful law firms, the most successful law firms, and you made a statement about what they're doing. If you think about the law firms that you consider to be in that most successful category, do they have sales staff that's doing sales that are not the attorneys, or are their attorneys doing the selling?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think both cases it's true. So I always say when people want to end up scaling up, there's usually 2 directions they'll go. And this is really true of any business, but in attorneys, we'll make it a little bit more specific. So people either really enjoy the social aspect, the marketing, the press in the flesh, that enjoying the consultations, or they really, really enjoy the fulfillment side of things. So for the people where they enjoy the consultations, you'll often see the attorney maintain that role. In the situation where and again, like if, when you go from 6 to 7 and 8 figures, it's like, you're not shaking hands at a BNI chapter, you're shaking hands with really powerful, referral partnerships and that kind of stuff too. You're maintaining those relationships. But still, like, that's something that people want to hang on to. I think people, and it's just, general good piece of business advice I've heard over the years, like, stay in your, your circle of genius. Right. But on the same token, it's like, yeah, we have people that are successful that have staff under them. And like, usually it would be, I'm probably not an associate, but like if you can get somebody who closes without you, it's really, really powerful. And it's kind of one thing because it's tough. Like there's a certain thing. And then, even beyond the legal space, there's like people, a lot of like in the startup world, which I mean, I always like to be aware of what's happening there because they got a lot of money pouring into it and, smart people, that are, they're considering these challenges. But one of the things they talk about is the founder driven sales stage. And the thing is, a lot of the times the founder is going to have the highest close rate in the company. But at the end of the day, a really, really good closer can actually do better and have more output because the founder can only focus on part of their time. And if, they're getting utilized as a resource for sales, that prevents them from moving the ball forward in other ways that only they can do. So overall, I see it happening on both levels. I'll actually say it's a lot more challenging to get somebody up to the point where they're closing really high than it is to do it yourself. Because you can control what you're doing every 24 hours of the day, right? And the other thing too is that like it's kind of hard to take that like natural. I think there's one thing that's super true, and this is super relevant for me right now. When we're recording, my head of intake is actually on vacation, so I'm hopping back in the saddle for sales for the first time in probably, I don't know, 4 months, and it's been really, really enjoyable not to do that. I've been able to focus on moving the ball forward elsewhere in the business, but I'm back in here and I'm realizing, yeah, there's kind of a Svengali effect that people have for, because they want to hear the dude. And it's like, as the founder, you're usually the person who's able to answer literally any question. And it's not that you need to be able to answer every question to get somebody to walk across the line, but it's the confidence that comes from knowing there's no place that conversation can go that comes across. I think that's what really gets people across the line. So anyways, kind of a long-winded answer, but people do it.
Yes. Yeah. But it's really interesting because some of the points that you make highlight some other things that really are, we need to think about, because I mean, ultimately, if you're growing your law firm, at some point, you're going to have to find somebody else to do everything that you do. If you make a list of 1,000 tasks, these are the 1,000 tasks I do, at some point in the growth of my journey, every one of those 1,000 tasks is going to be somebody else is going to be doing that. There cannot be a task in the business that has to be me. And there can be, but that means you're limiting your growth, right? So if you want to be able to grow exponentially, if you want to be able to grow as big as it can get, everything needs to be something you can hand off. So coming from that place and looking at the sales process, you said some interesting things. One, you said that the founder is going to have the highest close rate. And the sooner that you come to grips with that and you say, okay, if I'm going to train somebody else to do sales, I'm going to have to just assume and understand that they're not going to close at the same rate that I close. However, it's my job to make sure that I get them prepared, trained, and ready to close at the highest rate possible for them as not being the founder, as a salesperson. The other thing that I find really interesting is that because the founder tends to have the highest close rate, because when a law firm starts, there's one person in the office, and that's the owner. When they go to hand off that sales process to somebody else, the natural assumption is that it needs to be somebody of my caliber. And automatically they're making this correlation with, I close sales because I'm an attorney. But the reality is you're closing sales because you're the founder, not because you're an attorney. And the mistake that we make is we hire an attorney and we say, here, you're going to be doing consults and you're going to be closing sales. When in reality, they may not be the best person for the job. They may not have what it takes to be a salesperson. As a matter of fact, would you want to take somebody who only has legal training and try to push them into a sales position? Or would you rather take somebody who has sales training and give them the broad strokes that they need to know for the legal services that you sell, knowing that they're not going to give any legal advice in the sales consult because they don't know any, right? So you never have that conflict. And at the same time, you have somebody who already knows how to sell, understands human psychology, knows how to drive the conversation forward to a close, and do that. So when we start to look at saying, okay, I'm going to hand this off to somebody, understand that the reason that you're good at closing is not because you're the attorney, but because you're the founder. And therefore, you can hand off the sales process to somebody who's not an attorney. That's from all the things that you said. Those are some of the takeaways that that I heard. But I want to take the conversation back a little bit, because we need to understand marketing and sales, right? Where does one stop and one start? And how do I know if I have a marketing problem or a sales problem? I will tell you, I'm sure you're very familiar with this report, the Clio Legal Trends Report of 2019. They went and solicited 2,000 law firms pretending to be a client needing legal services, and 2/3. I don't have the exact percentage in front of me, but it was about 65% or so. 2/3 either never answered the call, never returned the initial voicemail message, or never called back after the initial conversation. Right? Which if we think about that logically, we immediately can understand that you're not going to make a sale if you don't do that basic step, right? But more than half the industry, if you take that sample set as what the rest of the industry is doing, more than half the industry is behaving this way, which highlights a massive opportunity on one hand, but on the other hand, it also highlights the fact that there's probably a lot of leads coming through the door that are not turning into clients. And we need to start thinking about why is that happening? We might have assumed it was happening because my close rate is only X%, but maybe it's happening because you're losing them along the way. Some of them are not making it to the consult. Some of them are not showing up for the consult they scheduled. Some of them are even after the consult, they're not closing. So there's all these steps along the way where you can lose them, and focusing there may be a way better place to focus. So help us navigate the difference between marketing and sales and how to determine which one is the one I need to focus on.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, and I guess I haven't really thought about like a real like like Mason-Dixon line, like it actually becomes from marketing to sales. But let me tell you about how we kind of think about it internally. So one of the things we do with all of our clients is we run them through a process every single week that measures the key steps as we kind of define them, and we call it ACQSS. For this, we're talking about webinar clients. So the A stands for attendees, but if you want to do any kind of marketing whatsoever, you'd probably do LCQSS, consider it a lead, right? So C stands for contact rate. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize, and this is actually funny. So I ended up discovering this. I had an absolutely awful quarter a couple of years ago. And we had a situation where we were really dependent on cold email outreach. And we were sending it from casefuel.com, and then basically casefuel.com got shut down. So we did casefuel.us, casefuel.info, casefuel.biz, and then one after another. It's just, with the volume that you're sending out. So I was like, I got nothing to do. I'm going to literally start cold calling. And I did it. And the thing is that I realized a lot of stuff in that exercise that's kind of become what we recommend for clients at this point. But one of the things is that the term close rate is very, very flexible. And one of the things that we find, to take it out a little bit broader, is that like you can lie with statistics pretty easily. There's people who say I close 100% of the deals that walk in the door, but what they really mean is I close 100% of the deals that I want, which means more than likely any person that ends up not closing is retroactively determined to be someone that they didn't want in the first place, right? It's kind of the sour grapes phenomenon. But basically, one of the things, and this is why we have all these steps that we do, one of the key things about getting people out, you can't close people that don't pick up the phone. So the first step that we look at is contact rate. And one of the things that we realize, so I would almost consider contact rate, and this is literally just a hygiene thing. So, there's a lot of, I think I referred to the study in the book, but there's a really famous Wharton study where the chance of contacting somebody past 5 minutes just drops off an absolute cliff. But yeah, again, the way that you increase contact rate is by dealing with leads as quickly as possible if you can. And again, the more of an interface, one of the things that we found helps with the webinar model is that having had somebody's attention for an hour makes it easier for them to remember. This is a huge transition when we moved away from Facebook leads, where people would basically forget about it 10 minutes after they fill out the form, which is wild. But anyway, contact rate should be anywhere from, our benchmarks internally are between 50 and 75%. You're going to get probably north of 75% and higher if you really have somebody that's dedicated, that's going to call those leads immediately as they come in. And the type of marketing that's coming from is really important. If you're talking about something like Avo or Google or somewhere where you're not the only attorney that's in the mix, it becomes way, way more important to respond to that quickly. So that contact rate is a huge thing. The second thing, the Q, is the qualification rate. And this is something that I'm trying to think. This actually was this topic of my presentation at the summit this year, but you have to determine whether qualification is happening at the point of intake. And this is to avoid that retroactive cooking of the books, which allows people to feel really, really good about themselves. But you determine somebody's qualification based on what their status is when they're coming into the process. And normally this is really when you get somebody on the phone and they've, in most instances, they're looking to speak to an attorney and you're going to set them up for the consultation. It's more than fair to ask them, okay, let me ask you a little bit more of the situation just to see whether we're going to be a good fit. This also, as a side note, is really, really important for preventing just getting on a consult with somebody and realizing they don't have any money or their problem isn't something that you can help with, or God forbid, they hired another attorney and they're just, doing their due diligence or whatever, right? So if we're doing that at the level of after contacting people, it actually keeps you honest down the line, but also keeps marketing honest. If we figure out at that point that we have 5% of the people at the point of contact are not qualified, then yeah, let's figure out and let's change something about the marketing. But again, I will say, depending on the market, depending on the service, 50 to 75% of qualification. Again, like we don't want to get too ridiculous for something. If you're only, looking to work with people whose last name happens to be Rockefeller, who lives in a home that's worth 8 figures or above, be realistic with yourself. And especially depending on like where you're doing your marketing and stuff. But, within reason, it's like, there's some pretty basic questions. So the kind of stuff that we recommend people ask for estate planning, which is top of mind, which is, hey, look, do you have a home? Are you self-employed or a business owner? Do you have children you're looking to pass assets onto, or any of those minors? Who else is involved in making this decision? Super basic stuff. So, if the person has a home, for the most part, if it's, in the United States, it's going to be at least a couple $100,000. With a life insurance policy, that's someone who probably has some assets worth protecting. If they woke up on a piece of cardboard, you're more like, you can say, hey, look, I don't know if it really makes sense for us to speak with the attorney, but again, we're making it objective and we're doing it right there. So we have ACQ. S is set rate. So once we have somebody that's qualified, we should be aiming to shoot, again, 50 to 75% of those people you should be able to set on a consultation. And basically, it's really not that crazy. There's some things that you can do from a marketing perspective to help. I always like to recommend people lean on scarcity. One of the things, and this is this is an interesting story. I'm not sure if I've ever brought this up on a podcast before, but way back in the day, we had, and they're still a client to this day. We had a firm that was in Dallas, Texas area. They ended up just really, really high quality, great firm for family law. But the thing is, they said, Jan, I'm not doing a free consultation. And I told them, you're insane. This is Google. Everyone else does a free consultation. You're never going to get any calls. So we took the word free out of the consultation, and then, call for your consultation. And then people were like, oh yeah, so where's my free consultation? They literally would insert the word mentally into the phone call when they were doing it. So then we're like, how the heck are we supposed to do this? It's like, and I just kind of thought about it from like a branding perspective. It was like, well, if somebody sees the word consultation, that's something that's free, regardless of whether you say it or not, because everyone else is saying it. So instead we said, hey, well, why don't we say, hey, get your, winning divorce game plan from like a top Dallas attorney. And then people started paying for the consultation. And one thing I forgot to mention, that this guy had a $10,000 minimum retainer. It was worth it because he's board certified and he works with, some really, really complex oil royalty stuff and all that kind of thing. But making that change actually got people to be able to pay for the consultation, which we're calling a winning divorce game plan, and take the 10K retainer when it ended up coming. But the real key is that you can't call it a consultation. So one of the ways that we usually instruct people in when we're doing the webinars is like, hey, look, we've got our, blah, blah, blah session. And, we charge $400 an hour for the attorney. It's usually anywhere from 6 to 90 minutes. So that's normally $750, but basically, we have some capacity for next week. So it'll be no cost if you can figure it out. So like, you're interested in that, let's set you up for next week. So we have some time pressure. Something that's free today is going to be free tomorrow. So basically we need to give a reason why and don't lie about it. Like, this is within your own level of comfort. But again, if we're not getting them in the office, we're not going to be able to help them. And God forbid they go to LegalZoom or one of your competitors who just started 2 days ago. You're not serving anyone if that ends up being the case. And then the last part is the actual consultation. So I would say without a doubt, that is something that I would consider sales. And the thing is that for the most part, I feel like the deeper you get into the process, the less it's just showing up. Even comparing the conversation where you qualify and set a consultation to the conversation where you actually take a consultation and close it, both of those we like to operate with scripts, but in the consultation, it's more of a guideline. Like, you can't have a script in front of you when you're talking to somebody in their office. So you know the notes that you want to hit. But, realistically, when we're going through and like, we have the privilege of being able to test this in the place, because we actually have a team that we use for dialing. So it's really cool for like Skunkworks to test this stuff out. Whenever we see the numbers slipping, it's usually pretty easy stuff. So one of the other things too, for contact rate, here's a freebie. Spam dialers suck and they've ruined the world for everyone. So always dial twice. Spam dialers never dial twice. Dial twice and don't leave a message, and they'll call back because they'll assume it's your friend. If you're in the right area code, it's going to show up. So whenever we see the contact rate drop internally, we say, hey, look, you're doing the double dial. Looks like you have, and let's get back on that. The second thing is when we listen to and this is also, great tip. If you have the ability to record calls for your intake staff or sales staff, go ahead and do that, because it's usually pretty easy to tell when things are happening. So when we see our set rate dropping, most of the time it's when people are kind of freestyling. And this is the thing. Everyone has there's a point in which you shouldn't be reading from a script. But the thing that's really interesting, in my personal experience of just going over this for this last week, I'm kind of doing this just to kind of show everyone how it's done on some level. But like, I literally bring the script up and I read it word by word, just because even me, the founder, should be, accountable to that. And when you have things written in a certain way and they're purposeful, like there's little things that are built in, right? Like, and if you go out, this is a whole different ball of wax to kind of uncover, Moshe. So it's probably worth a longer discussion. But when we give opportunities for other people to steer the call, a lot of times we lose control. And by control leads to leadership, and leadership is ultimately how you get people to the point where they're making the right decision for themselves. And if that decision happens to be working with you, you have to have control of the conversation. So when we go off script, we have situations where people just start, and I'm sure if anyone's ever, taken a lead call and you have the situation where you're on the back foot the whole time, they're just peppering you with questions and, your back's against the wall. And then all of a sudden, like, oh yeah, I guess I'll think about it. Like, that's what you're trying to avoid. So sticking to the script is going to help with that. But again, it's more of like a hygiene thing, doing the right stuff early in the process with setting the consultation. The art and the guts and the skill really comes in on that actual consult. But from that point, we actually recommend everyone try to close in the first consult. And if not getting the close, because there's some people you could literally put a gun to their head and they wouldn't be able to make a decision, we need to make sure that that's getting handled as soon as possible. Like, let's check back tomorrow. Like, let's not check back next week or next month, God forbid. But that's overall kind of how we conceptualize it. So I would say it's marketing from the level, I would say up until the point of qualification, that's what marketing is responsible for. Past the point of qualification, the set rate and the close rate, I would say that would be sales.
Got it. Well, that was a ton of amazing information. It was a very long response to my question, but it was a ton of amazing information. And I really appreciate you going through that whole process and the mnemonic that you use. Really insightful to, to see how you think about it and how you think through it. I'm a little bit caught up on a few things. First of all, one of the things that you mentioned was this double dial thing. When are you dialing a number where they're not expecting? Is this a lead that came in and you're returning their call, or is this cold calling to try to solicit business? What how exactly is that manifesting?
Really good question. Okay. And yeah, I didn't realize the assumption that was built into that. So basically, we never recommend cold calling for attorneys. It'll get you disbarred in most states. But we are living in a world right now where we have people that are going to call on the phone, but we also have people that are responding via chat. We have people that are responding to forums on your site, and people who might be responding to marketing that you're putting out there. For us, this is people who attend a webinar, and we always ask for a phone number when we're doing that. But if somebody's using any sort of a lead magnet or, something else, basically you're doing outbound in a sense. So it's clean because it's opted in. And if people aren't cool with that, they're not going to put their phone number down, but that's really the opportunity. But even for the most conservative marketers out there, you have a form on your site that has a phone number at some point. So you need to do that. And like, the thing is, it's interesting. Like, I'm a phone guy. I try to instruct everyone, like on our client success team, to call people as soon as possible, just because I think it's really important to get that bandwidth of the communication. But there's some people who just hate it, and they're never gonna, like, if you only had a phone number and a call, they'd go to the next site. So pretty much, like, there has to be the opportunity, and like, for any of the deployments where we've had chat pop up there, I would say on average, it's probably about 50, 25, 25. 50% of people will call. It's still going to be the biggest modality, but you're going to have, probably at least half, if not close to that, then you'll have that aren't going to be able to call you at that point. And you're going to have to call that person at some point. Yeah.
So it's very interesting. And this is where, you have to think about all the different ways to capture that person who hits your website, because what if they don't put something in chat? What if they don't even send a contact form? they get to your website and they leave. Is there a way to salvage that? And I think that there is, and I think that people don't realize the power of using retargeting ads to do that, where you drive them to the next step. And if you're doing webinars, like you said, which I do want to dive into that topic real quick, but if you're doing webinars, somebody hits your website, now they start getting retargeted to your webinar ads. They might be more likely to sign up for that presentation. Now they spend an hour with you, they're much more likely to book, to set a call with you. Yeah. So talk to me about the webinar itself. What exactly is being covered on that webinar, and what is the sale at the end of it? Are you driving them to a consult? You kind of alluded that you're driving them to a free consult that's not free, but it's free temporarily. What's the content that's being covered in there, and what's the structure around that webinar?
Okay. So good question. So I can speak with a lot of specifics around the realm of estate planning, but to kind of take a little bit of a step out, if you're in a practice area, you have a practice area where there's a decision that's made over time, this is where a webinar can fit. So personal injury webinar is probably not going to fly. If you're doing a webinar on maybe some specific class action suit and you're talking to disabled veterans or something like that, that might work. So that's kind of the thing. But basically, we use a pretty specific format, and it's kind of interesting. A lot of the stuff that we found, just kind of as we've just taken more like responsibility for looking into people's process and helping out with them, like we've uncovered a lot of stuff. One of the themes that runs across the entire marketing and sales process is that attorneys love to talk about all of their credentials, and why not? Like you spent years getting this, and you spent years, getting the bona fides and winning the cases and being able to do it. But at the end of the day, people don't care about who you are until they understand that you care for them. Right. So, right. And this is like an old adage in copywriting too. It's like, you need to kind of create a gap to understand why people care. So it's like, when the situation where people like, they'll hop on a webinar. Hey, my name is so-and-so, I went to Yale, I graduated cum laude. I've been doing 2,000 trusts a month for the last 10 years. And, we've worked with the richest people and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, you haven't told the person why they might need this in the first place. And that's where people lose a lot of folks. So basically, and it's the same thing on consultations too. Like one of the biggest issues that we found is that people are and like, again, I think this is programming that comes from law school and big law. It's like, you wanted people hop on the consultation looking to demonstrate knowledge. And, one of the most problematic things that we found is like the default, how do you start a consultation is, hey, what questions do you have for me about estate planning? Like whatever the problem is. But anyways, going all the way back. So what we want to do with the structure of the webinar is we need to show people that you care, and you have to show people that they should care, right? And the way that we'll generally do this, and this, I can use estate planning as an example, but think about this for your practice area if that isn't it. But so it's an old copywriting formula that I did not come out with. This is around for decades before I was even born. But pain, agitate, solve. So pain, you got to show people why this is something that they should care about. In the realm of estate planning, the boogeyman is going to be probate. So a lot of people don't know what that word means, and a lot of people don't know how bad it is, right? I was actually training one of our new hires the other day too, and I was talking about it, and he was like, oh yeah, well, so what is that, like wills and deeds and stuff? And I had to explain to him. So he's like, yeah, so like my dad passed away when I was 14, and we ended up having, the money ended up going to us and my family and stuff like that because he had everything set up. So I'm like, you were in the situation where you're the beneficiary of the stuff that clients are going to be set up with. But if you say probate, like the people who have had those situations where it has happened to them, they'll understand. And a lot of times what we'll see is that people end up, especially on more of like the lead gen side of things, it's like a big reason for people wanting to go into probate is because they saw it happen to somebody that they care about. It happened a ton of COVID. But for the benefit of those people who don't have one of those immediate experiences, we need to show them how bad it is. So I usually recommend starting out with talking about the nightmares of probate. It's not great in any state. It's a little bit less awful in some, but you have to show them the train that's going to hit them if they stand still in the tracks. Next step is agitate. So when we agitate, we're addressing the smart Alex in the crowd who goes, oh, that's great. Awesome. Thanks for the information. I'm going to go on LegalZoom and get this stuff handled. Or, so we have to talk about the situations in which people can actually get in more trouble. And in a lot of cases, I think this is a really common look. It's just kind of a common thing. If you're an expert in any field whatsoever, the people who know a little bit are going to get in more trouble than the people who know nothing. Right. So we go through examples of how that happens. A lot of the times with estate planning stuff, it's people trying to do funky stuff with their wills. There's a lot of celebrity stories where we have situations where there were handwritten wills that were conflicting, and then, they ended up being tens of millions of dollars in litigation to prove which one was right, et cetera. And then finally, this is when we get to the point where most people start, which is the solution. And
Right.
then I'm always I always believe it's like, I want to, you hear the word tell more, sell more a lot. I think there's sort of a situation where you have to make a transition in their mind, but if you try to sell up front, they're going to be filtering your information in some way, and they're not going to be as open as they could be. So I recommend everyone, they basically need to structure this like a public service announcement. This is like something that you're doing to educate them. And even at the point where we transition to the solution, not until the last frame do we even let people know that we do this. There's a lot of subcommunication in this, because in the process of illustrating all the pains, especially if we're using examples that you were able to get somebody out of, or that kind of thing, you're demonstrating expertise in how you talk about the subject. There's also a little bit of a halo effect when you're just going through this with the tell more, sell more approach. And it's, this is a helpful guy. Now, when you go into the solution, it's going to be your solution. And, everyone has their philosophy with how they practice their way of law. And in the process of showing that, you're kind of educating somebody what to look for. It happens to be how you do things. And at the end, the transition is basically, well, by the way, there's like, if you've shown how to do this, I might be able to help out with you if you have a need. And to take it a little bit, a little bit more of a harder close. It's like, hey, look, if you've made it this far, obviously, you're hearing some stuff that's important to you. So basically to thank you for taking all this time, we're going to basically offer, my time, which I bill at $400 per hour. We'll do 60 minutes, 90-minute sessions, and you call it your whoop-de-doo family planning or legacy planning or whatever you happen to call it. We normally charge $750 for that, and it's going to be no cost for anyone who's going to be on this webinar, but we have a couple spots left. So then if that's you, go ahead and click the link below, and then you can schedule some time with my team and we'll get you set up. And then that's pretty much it. Very, very low key. And the thing is, one super important thing that I think a lot of people got burned with in the last year, and just, kind of a big picture thing, like the webinar stuff, it's there are a couple actors in the space that I won't say they didn't know what they were doing, but they were more concerned with continuing to get more clients than to solve the problems that their existing clients were facing. There's been a huge, I think, miscommunication in how many people to expect from that. If you hit everything right, it's not automated. I usually say, compared to seminars, for people who are familiar with seminars, 80% of the people that you'll close from a seminar are people who took the first step in the room after you close it. And you can chase the 20% if you want. With this, if you're absolutely crushing it, 20% of the people that are going to close from this are people who took the first step at the end of the webinar. And the 80% is not if you want to, it's pretty much non-negotiable. So you have to figure out a way to get to those people who attended. But that's basically why, to backtrack a little bit, that's why we have as thoroughly a thought out plan for getting those people as we do. So basically, the expectation isn't that we're going to get 100% of people to take the next step. If you're expecting that, then you're going to have a bad time. But basically, you will have the opportunity to reach out. But more importantly, you'll have set a reason to reach out for the people who didn't. At the end of the day, it's really, really important to have a reason to call people, because, like, oh, hey, that thing you didn't want yesterday, do you want it now? It's not going to work. Why would you call that person, right? But when we've made it scarce, then we have the grounds to reach out to somebody, and you're doing them a favor. You're offering value. Hey, man, this is going up to $750 next week. You want it? I'd love to set you up if you're still interested in it. And it's a way to tee up the rest of the process to be more successful.
Jan, it's crazy, but we're totally out of time and we have so much more to cover. So you're going to have to become one of our repeat guests as well. We're going to have you back here to continue this conversation. But this is, so much insight packed into this episode. So when we close it out, I'm going to ask you to leave everybody with one parting piece of advice, and also what's the next steps that they can take to follow up with you, or if there's somewhere that you want to send them. But folks, I just want to rein it back in to make you aware of the fact that what you can see from this conversation is that there are so many things to think about in this process of marketing, of sales. To think that you're going to become an expert at everything is almost impossible. And you really need to start getting good at thinking about who, not how, right? Jan went and figured out how to be a marketer when he had issues with marketing agencies. But I think that you need to figure out a way to vet those marketing people so that you can get somebody who you trust, who's going to do right by you. Same thing with sales. Get a sales consultant in to help you facilitate better close process, to help you find those missing pieces. You got to get really good at putting the right people in place, or getting the right consultants in place to be able to drive your business further, rather than thinking, I'm going to do this myself. And I fall trap to it all the time myself as a business owner. It's a natural thing to just dive into something. But the reality is you always have to question, is this the best use of my time? And I know it's completely off topic from what we've been discussing, but this conversation has just highlighted the point that this is really intricate. There's so much to it. Like, don't even try to create your own webinar. Sit with somebody who understands marketing, understands how it needs to be laid out, have a conversation with them, tell them everything that they need to know about your clients, their pain points, and your solution. Let them help you organize that slide deck, organize the flow of that conversation so it's set up right. I'm gonna turn it back to you, Jan, because I have something I'm late to. So we're gonna rush through this. But if you can just leave one last piece of advice for everybody and how they can follow up with you.
Okay, parting piece of advice is, when it comes to the whole sales and marketing thing, I obviously know it's not true that you're in control of everything that happens, but I think most people could use a few more clicks in the belief that they're in their control. So I want you to think, for your next challenge, what would you do if you were 100% in control of that challenge? And how would that change how you're defining where the focus should be? That's one thing I'll leave you with. And if people want to reach out, Law Firm Growth Podcast is fantastic. I'll also say we actually, for the time being, have a free estate planning sales course in a Facebook group that we're trying to get up around the topic, which is going to be at facebook.com/groups/double-your-case-files, all spelled out.
Awesome. We'll link that up in the show notes. So you guys could just click the link in the description. Jan, as usual, as always, it's been a pleasure. It's been a great conversation. And folks, if you normally listen to the podcast on double speed, I hope you slowed it down for this one, because Jan tends to talk really quickly, but really amazing stuff. And it's been insightful to me, and I'm sure it's been insightful to you as well. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, click the subscribe button so you know when we release a new episode. We're here twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday. Tuesday's my solo day. I'm here by myself, just sharing with you whatever's on my mind at the time. Thursdays, I have a guest that comes on the show. Folks, enjoy your weekend. We'll catch you next Tuesday. Take care.
Have you been enjoying the show? We sure hope so. To make sure you never miss an episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button in your podcast player app. Next week, we will be back with more valuable resources and ideas on how to break the mold and take your law firm to the next level.